The moral imperative for greater diversity and inclusion in Treasury, along with its direct link to corporate performance, is well known. But nonetheless, it's been a year of mixed progress. The pandemic has highlighted enduring gender inequalities and is having an outsized impact on women. Women make up the majority of health and social care workers on the front lines, yet statistics show that women are disproportionately considering downshifting their careers or leaving the workforce entirely as a result of the pandemic. In a special International Women's Day panel on gender equality, co-hosted by Kyriba and Treasury Today, we explore the impact of the pandemic on gender equity. Our panelists discuss the importance of role models and how working from home requires a redefinition of traditional corporate professionalism. Sophie Jackson, Treasury Today's co-publisher and head of strategic content, speaks with 5 industry leaders. India Gary Martin, leadership expert, coach, and advisor at Leadership for Execs. Mary Wineclaw, senior manager of foreign exchange and forecast management at Baxter International. Danette Lee, vice president and assistant treasurer at Host Hotels and Resorts. Karen James, head of treasury for nonprofit Sightsavers. And my friend and colleague, Dori Malouf, senior principal value engineer at Kyriba. Over to you, Sophie.
Hi, everyone. Hi, happy International Women's Day 2021. Just to introduce myself, I'm Sophie Jackson, publisher and head of strategic content at the Treasury Today group. Today, we're going to be looking at the importance of moments like International Women's Day, the legacy of the gender equality journey in our industry, and most particularly on the impact of the pandemic on these conversations that we're having. I wanted to start this International Women's Day by paraphrasing a note from the Regional Director of Europe at the World Health Organization, Dr. Hans Kluge, who's highlighted some really important areas for focus around gender equality, and particularly in relation to the current and ongoing pandemic. Dr. Kluge last week in a press briefing took the opportunity to shine a spotlight on some of the issues that are affecting women and one of the biggest employment sectors for women globally and regionally, which is the health and social care workforce. He stated that when the pandemic hit, not a single country in Europe had achieved gender equality, not one. COVID-19, as we all are aware, I'm sure, has since aggravated and shone a light on underlying structural gender inequalities. To run through the order of events today, I'm very lucky to be joined by a phenomenal group of people who I respect and admire, who are going to look with us today at the legacy of gender equality in our industry. So first, I'm going to be joined, as I mentioned, by India Gary Martin, head of leadership for executives, who's going to be having a quick chat with us today. I'll then be turning to our panelists today, who are Danette Lee, vice president and assistant treasurer of Host Hotels and Resorts, Mary Wineclaw, senior manager of foreign exchange and forecast management at Baxter International, Dori Malouf, senior principal value engineer at Kyriba, and finally Karen James, treasury manager at Sightsavers. So first of all, India, happy International Women's Day. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and a delight to be here, as always, with my Treasury Today family.
India, why do you think it's important that we come together to celebrate moments like this?
You know, I kind of think of every day as International Women's Day, just like I think of every day as Black History Month, because I think, you know, the contributions that we make are important. But I think, you know, as much as we're celebrating the contribution of women to greater society, we're also challenged by what's happening as a result of the pandemic and what that means for women. And that you can't ignore that. And again, while we celebrate, it's important that we also take very imminent action around ensuring that we do not fall decades behind, or go back decades, I should say, not decades behind. We're already decades behind. Let's talk about like going back even further as a result of the economic impact of the pandemic and what it's meant for women and their families.
Thank you so much for being with us to kick us off today, India, and enjoy the rest of your International Women's Day. Okay, so with no further ado, I want to turn now to my panelists. So Dori, I want to ask you first, when did you first become aware of the conversation around gender equality, and what's your journey as an ally for this inclusion been like?
I became aware of these types of scenarios and situations around women high school, actually. And in high school, watching the Anita Hill testimony for the Clarence Thomas nomination to the Supreme Court. I became aware of it with how the media was treating the situation. I became aware of it with how she was being presented and asked questions by the senators who were trying to pretty much catch her on a lie. And I thought it was unfortunate at the time, and I actually had to do a report on it for school, in what I watched and what I witnessed and what my beliefs were on the topic. Outside of that, then my journey went through college, and I got my first internship opportunity into Treasury by a woman. And that woman became my mentor throughout the early part of my career. And then when I graduated, she gave me the opportunity to officially join the team as a Treasury analyst. And it was unfortunate later on, a few months after I joined, that she gave birth to her first child and had to leave the workforce. Or at least she felt like that was her only option. And as a young professional at that time, I felt, I felt badly for her, because I felt like she didn't feel like she had options or was given any options to maintain her career while still be a mom at the same time. And what would that mean for me when it was my turn to have kids with my wife and build a family there?
Danette, I want to turn to you now. I know that you're equally passionate around the space, including gender equality. Tell me why this is something that's been important to you, and how that's manifested for you over the course of your career.
Great, thank you, and happy International Women's Day to everyone. So my passion around gender equality, similar to Dory, started at a young age. From playing soccer with the boys during recess to wanting to become an auto mechanic when I grew up. In my mind, there was nothing wrong with doing what the boys did. Then as an adult, I increasingly witnessed and experienced inequalities. It wasn't as obvious as an accountant, where the male-female ratio was about even, but as my career progressed, there were fewer women around me, not necessarily at Host, but in bank meetings and conferences. And what was instrumental over the years for me was the fact that I had an amazing female boss relatively early on in my career, who was a role model and a mentor to me.
I want to turn now, Mary, to talk to you. You and I have worked together for a few years around women in Treasury, and there are some real wins that we've seen in this space. I don't want us just to think about the negatives. What are some of the things that you've seen change or improve since we began working together 3 or 4 years ago, particularly, that you think have changed this conversation that we're having?
I think the one thing that I have noted, and by the way, happy International Women's Day to everyone, was something that Dory has brought to the table, which was an increase in the allies. What I've really seen is a lot of camaraderie across the table from men, essentially saying, we need to have more women in leadership roles. That was something that early on in my career, I didn't feel that we necessarily had. And in fact, Sophie, you and I have talked about this previously, that we lacked that. The other thing that I've seen, at least from my experience, was an increase in open roles that were being filled by women from leadership perspective. I've had the ability to continue to be promoted in various roles and at different companies. And I think that door is now starting to open more, which is a positive for us.
Dory, I want to come back to you again. As Danette and the others have mentioned, the theme for this year's International Women's Day is choose to challenge. So what are some of the ways that you think allies such as yourself can be active in challenging the status quo of what's going on around them?
As a leader of a Treasury team, I had the same situation where a very smart and key member of the Treasury team was with child, and she gave birth to that child and came back to me after time off and said that she wanted to leave the workforce as well. I was able to go to my HR leadership and say, look, I have a very key member of my team. I don't want to lose them simply because they want to take care of their child. And we were able to put together a program for her where she could work part-time. And it actually was transformational for the organization, because then other managers started to do the same thing. 2.4 million women have left the workforce during COVID. And I think we all need to challenge ourselves and ask why that is. Is it because they are in a similar situation that I'm just referencing, where they felt like they need to take care of their kids? And if that's the case, we're all doing that, men and women. We're all on Zoom working from home. So why is it that 2.4 million women have left the workforce and left for good? So to the point India made earlier, are we taking steps backwards rather than continuing to move forward?
Mary, on that note, we spoke together recently around the issues of balancing at the moment. We spoke particularly around this idea of professionalism, mixing with authenticity, as the structures around us that allow us to step from one role to another have begun to disintegrate. It's very hard, I think, for all of us to walk that tightrope between being professional and being ourselves and being parents, as some of you are. How have you found this struggle, this balancing act, if we can call it that? If anyone's actually doing it correctly, I'd like to hear from them. What's that process been for you during this pandemic?
I don't know if I can say I'm doing it 100% correctly. That I think I would start with. For starters, I really had to redefine what my perception or even definition of professionalism as a woman in the workplace was. Prior to the pandemic, for me, professionalism really revolved around being seen as the subject matter expert, right? Also being the epitome of being competent, being knowledgeable, and at times, in all of the various roles that I've worn, that really meant for me prioritizing my work and my career over my family. As much as I hate to admit that was sort of the workforce mentality that I had prior to the pandemic. Now that we're in this pandemic, as a mom of 4, you guys, my term or definition of professionalism has completely changed. And that's morphed to me, not just wearing the hat of an accounting manager or an FX risk manager in managing my corporate team, but now I am a work from home mom, right? I am a teacher, I'm a librarian, I am the groundskeeper here at my house. I've become an IT expert even. My roles have really evolved. And I had to consider those various roles as part of who I am. My authentic self means that I am all of these things at one time.
I couldn't agree more with Mary. The fact that we are balancing being working moms and trying to remain professional, it's challenging, but redefining what professional is makes it that much more acceptable. And as you work with other individuals, they're dealing with the same issues at home, and having that acceptance and that redefining what professionalism is, I think certainly helps go a long way in terms of having that work-life balance and feeling good about what you're doing, being able to be a mom as well as a working professional.
Karen, did you have anything you wanted to add around the issues that we've been talking about?
Well, it certainly resonates with me, but what I would add is that one thing we lose track of is that being a mother, a librarian, an IT expert is a professional way of life. We're recognized for the job we get paid for, but you don't necessarily get recognized for being the professional mum. And I think it levels the playing field that you have women and men who get interrupted in their Zoom call, and therefore there's no difference between us. You are at that person, a professional person who's just been interrupted. And it's very, very easy, and we shouldn't ever lose sight of how much effort it takes to run a life and a day in the life of a mum and a dad.
Danette, I want to turn back to you again. I mean, on a similar theme, perhaps expanding slightly. I wanted us to think about how we've been managing some of our challenges or anxieties that we're facing.
If more women are working from home, could they unintentionally miss out on opportunities to connect, to network, mentorship programs that lead to advancement? To avoid this, I think companies really need to ensure that there isn't any favoritism towards those that choose to be in person versus those that work remotely when it comes to evaluations, opportunities, mentorship programs.
Karen, you did work in the private sector for some time and now are head of Treasury at Sightsavers. Can you tell me what you've noticed as you've moved into the non-profit space around some of the issues that we're discussing here around gender equality?
Yeah, well, I'm very lucky to be part of Sightsavers, whose mission is not only to prevent avoidable blindness and to assist in eye health care, but there's also a huge program and mission statement of inclusivity across all spectrums. And therefore, I'm very lucky to have an organisation that provides good communication, we've got good opportunities, and you're always considered. Our CEO, Dr. Caroline Harper, is a fantastic role model for women within our organisation and globally with our partners, our associates and our donors. And she leads by example. You know, she reaches out, she's there for everyone. Every Friday there's a call and she just reaches out to all of us, looking at not only our mental health, but our needs. Opportunities are always available to us. And so therefore I found Sightsavers are much more, not informal in a negative way, but informal as in it allows people to speak without any discrimination or reluctance or resistance, which I didn't find and wasn't easy in a corporate.
And what are some of the people that you admire, Dorian, and how do you take example from the work that they've done as allies to the cause?
Some people may not be aware, but Warren Buffett and the Berkshire Hathaway organization, whenever they're doing acquisitions or adding companies to their profile, they actually do look at the company's equality picture. They look at the number of board members and if they have any women or diversity as a part of their board. And I think that's incredible. And it shows in how he views his organization. Being successful means that you have to have diversity as a part of that success story.
Mary, I want to come to you now with the next of my questions for you. You changed jobs recently, so congratulations on your new role. But I want us to think about that. So some of you may not be happy where you are right now. You might be looking at moving. What is that process like during a pandemic, and how did you manage that, Mary?
You know, going into that transition or the unknown was a little bit nerve-wracking, to say the least, right? I was transitioning from a role that had been basically determined that would be 100% remote going forward, not just during the pandemic. So, you know, making that transition meant that I would lose that opportunity to basically be at home full time with my children and work from home. So it did require me to really take a step back. You know, any transition back to work scared me a little bit, right? Back to the office, back to the commute, back to the lack of dinners with my family. You know, that was something that was scary, but I think that as I navigate that space and the choose to challenge, right? Choosing to challenge what is going to be acceptable for my family and for me was very important and something that I had to advocate for myself and as a woman in the workplace. Having that conversation with my mentor to say, do I step out on faith and have the confidence even in myself to go into the next role to make the same strides that I did in my, you know, prior role. That was really important, and it required confidence. I think Danette mentioned it, and Dory might have touched on it. It really required confidence in myself to make that leap, to say no matter where you go, you will go and be great. You will go and you will shine, and you would do what you normally do, which is just to be a hard worker, right?
Karen, I want us to end on a note of looking ahead. So you mentioned your daughter, who I would like to tell everyone has become well trained and is apparently bringing Karen tea at home while she's working there. Your daughter's 22 now. You and I spoke about the differences that she'll face in the workplace compared to you. What are some of the hopes that you have for her and for this next generation that's coming through now?
Well, I think first of all, I'd like to say, you know, on the choose to challenge point, I said to her the other day when I knew I was coming on this, you know, the choose to challenge, have to challenge the fact that every woman matters. That's your mantra, and that's our mantra at home. because of the lessons I've learned, the experiences I've had as an older generation of women. Dory's spoken about it, the discrimination or the misconception about how you're going to be. I felt it was my place to teach her, mentor, really, teach her, encourage her, and support my daughter to feel the woman she needs to be, to feel empowered to take opportunities, to think differently about how she sees the world, not to take discrimination, but to aim as high as she feels she can, because obviously not everybody can achieve everything. They're not, you're not set out to be the best all the time, but as long as she feels happy with where she's achieved, that's important to me. And to the greatest extent, her destiny and her future are in her hands. And as a woman amongst men and women, each step she's taking will reinforce the amazing journey that women are on to be seen and heard and included. And that's the message I give her.